Leicester City was struck by an awful tragedy on Saturday night when a helicopter crash included owner Vichai Srivaddhanaprabha among the 5 people who died. Ahead of their first match following the horrific crash, I'm joined by goals betting editor Jim Knight to talk about how the deceased owner completely changed the club and where Leicester go next. So Jim, you're a season ticket holder at Leicester City. What's it been like in the city and the community so far last week?
I think it's been a feeling of shock and kind of disbelief almost. It's just been incredible, the outpouring of grief from Leicester City fans, but from fans all over the world of football. The memorial outside the stadium that sprung up with people bringing flowers from Sunday morning after the crash on Saturday night, because everyone feared the worst based on the reports that we'd heard. People were immediately kind of drawn to the ground as almost a place to go and to be together, even if it was just in silence, and to kind of mourn what we suspected would be a terrible loss. It's such a hard thing to deal with as a Leicester City fan, because they've been such a big part of the success and the story that everyone knows about. It's just been really, really difficult to deal with, I think, for a lot of fans around the ground. But in football, in generally, I think people were drawn to Leicester as an underdog, and they became everyone's second team during that season, where they ran to the title in such kind of emphatic fashion from relative obscurity compared to a lot of big teams. And I think that has gotten them a special place in a lot of people's hearts.
And football clubs are meant to be, the community hubs essentially.
Absolutely.
Often in the middle of the cities, giant stadiums, tens of thousands of people follow them. And sometimes you do get a sense that football has lost some of that sometimes, that sense of community. A lot of it is about money, spending money, receiving money for big player sales. But with Leicester, especially in the aftermath of this crash, you really do get the sense that this is a community club, don't you?
Absolutely. And as you said, football clubs are at the heart of communities. There are a few things in life that can bond tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of fans together. Away from the football pitch, obviously everyone knows about the title win and how incredible that was, but his investment in community projects, both in Leicester locally and back in Thailand, as his wealth kind of grew with the status of the club. The investment in things like the Children's Hospital in Leicester, he gave them £2 million to help the building of that, donated £1 million to the University of Leicester Medical Research Department, and was made an honorary doctorate of the university as well. He appreciated the local community and what the club meant, but also the impact he could have. Those are extremely generous sums of money, and while people might say, well, it's nothing to a man that's reportedly worth 3.3 billion, the point is that the impact that those generous donations will have on the local community, both have had already and will continue to have, are kind of priceless in a sense, because not only did it come from something locally, but it's been invested in the right places.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just little things like free beer, free donuts, a lot of people talked about that the day afterwards.
Yeah.
So it seems so insignificant, but at the same time,
it's the little gestures that, and as you said, I think the worry a lot of the time with ownership, both domestic and foreign, is that the club is basically being used as a vehicle for debt or for kind of asset stripping, for want of a better term, and being run to provide the ownership with a profit. Leicester was completely the opposite, and has continued to be. And those little gestures, beers at home games when it was the Chem's birthday, subsidised away travel, scarves, T-shirts for those fans making long trips. I remember going to several games when we were chasing promotion in the Championship up to Burnley, to Blackburn. The club would lay on free breakfast and coaches to encourage fans to go away, and the fans at Cardiff this weekend are being given kind of breakfast and scarves that was planned already before this had come about, which just, I think, shows the continued generosity. And yeah, they might not be the biggest gestures in the world, but they are appreciated nonetheless for what they are, which is a donation that isn't expected. It's not designed to be kind of a bribe towards the football club and the community. It's a token of appreciation, I think, of the fan base and how encouraging a crowd which is so motivated to get behind the players has such a big impact on the pitch, as well as kind of fostering goodwill within the community as well.
And I think a lot of what people are talking about right now is his generosity, but I think his legacy, Vichai's legacy at the end of the day, is going to be that bankrolling of that fairy tale Premier League title win, which I'm sure you remember very well. I mean, did you ever expect such a season like that in your lifetime?
I don't, when having been through Leicester's relative ups and downs since I started following the club when I was very, very little, we've seen, a relative modicum of success compared to a lot of clubs who've been to League Cup finals and won League Cups at Wembley, or certainly one beaten in another final. And promotion to the Premier League was our kind of promised land, as it were, after a long spell away in the Championship, down to League One and back to the Premier League again. That was seen as the pinnacle, I think, for us at that point, and the hope was that we could establish the club as, and Vichai has been on record to say his hope for Leicester City was that it was an established Premier League club. That's something, hopefully, which has been achieved from the investment that he's put in. But in the meantime, we went on an incredible run, and the club managed to perform the 5,000 to 1 underdog story that everyone knows so well. There wasn't even that much investment at that point. I mean, you look at some of the players that were involved in that title run: Jamie Vardy for £1 million, Riyad Mahrez for £400,000, and N'Golo Kante for the relatively kind of princely sum of €6.5 million, I think it was at the time. He put faith in the people that were behind the scenes, the scouting, the coaching. Nigel Pearson, who they brought back, who'd had a spell at the club previously before this ownership took over, brought him back to the club from Hull, decided he was the man to lead the club into the top flight, and he was. And a huge amount of credit must go to Pearson for the groundwork that he laid for Ranieri, who took over that season that obviously none of us will ever forget, but especially those local to the football club. It was incredible, and the following season with the Champions League as well, it was just beyond, I think, what any of us could have wildly dreamed about. But Vichai went on record when we got promoted to the Premier League in 2014 and said, I'd like to be in the Champions League within 4 years, which was kind of scoffed at, to be honest, within the media, because you hear it so often from owners with these lofty ambitions about being the biggest club in a region or the biggest club in the country, and actually, more often than not, it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen, but Leicester were able to make it a reality, which is just incredible.
I want to read out some of the tributes, some of the very emotional tributes from some of the Leicester players, past and present. So we'll start with star striker Jamie Vardy, who's been front and centre in a lot of the memorials this week. Obviously very emotional too. He said, "To me, you are a legend, an incredible man who had the biggest heart, the soul of Leicester City Football Club. Thank you for everything you did for me, my family and our club. I will truly miss you." Now, Vardy, he was one of the players who Vichai essentially lifted from anonymity, wasn't he? He gave him that big chance. He made him a millionaire.
Yeah.
And, you can definitely feel that love for him for having made him the man who he is right now, can't you?
I think one of the most striking things about the tributes from the players, and this seems to be kind of universal, it's not just the players that are even still at the club, it's former players, people who've worked with Vichai in various capacities that have kind of put their unwavering support behind the project as a whole. And I think what's most noticeable is that he saw himself as equals with those people. Money didn't necessarily see him elevate himself in kind of the way that he was perceived. It was a family. Like, he might have been at the head of that family in terms of the money in the bankroll, but he saw them as colleagues, as friends, as, not just employees, as it were, which is essentially what they are to a lot of football clubs. They pay the manager, they pay the players, they pay the staff. They're technically employees, but I think he saw them as family members, and I think that's coming out in the emotional tributes that we've heard and seen from players past and present.
Yeah, another couple here. One from Danny Drinkwater, who's another one of the stars of that title-winning season, now plays at Chelsea. He said, "Vichai wasn't just the owner of a football club. Most of the time, he felt like he was one of the lads. He was just a proper nice bloke who tried his hardest to make sure the players were happy." And England and Leicester defender Harry Maguire said, "Words can't describe how I feel. I will never forget the chairman's support, not only during my time at Leicester, but also during the World Cup." And you get the feeling that Vichai is one of those sort of guys who probably gave him texts while he was at the World Cup.
I would, it wouldn't surprise me if, he was in and around those grounds in Russia to see Harry in action and on the field, off the field for them in personal lives. I mean, there's some wonderful photos of Vichai at Jamie Vardy's wedding recently that have kind of re-emerged on social media, and I think that says it all. There can't be many people who would be keen to invite their boss to their wedding, and I think that's the way that he was viewed was as a friend as much as anything else, which is, I think, about as high a compliment as you can pay to someone in that position.
Especially a billionaire. Not a lot of billionaires come across as affable, generous. Yeah. Just kind, warm human beings.
Yeah, and just people you want to be around. Speaking as a fan of the club, he was very approachable when the parades for the title-winning season were happening. They weren't shielded away. They were on the open-top bus. They were at the kind of open-top, the kind of gathering in Victoria Park with 250,000 people. They were there, they were front and centre, but in a way where they didn't want to hold the limelight.
And Riyad Mahrez, of course, he left Leicester in the summer. He joined Manchester City. He scored against Tottenham on Monday, only a couple of days after the helicopter crash. And he dedicated his goal to Vichai. And he said afterwards, "The boss was very special to me. I spent 4.5 years there and have many memories with him. That is why when I scored, I put my hands in the sky for him. He did a lot for me and Leicester, and it's very difficult to speak about. He was like a dad." And, you know, that's, again, family impression. It's all about family. And finally, Kasper Schmeichel, who seemed like one of the ones who was most greatly hit by the tragedy. And he obviously saw the helicopter crash.
Yeah, he was still on the kind of premises when it happened. I think he was one of the first to the scene to attempt to kind of,
He was there till 1 o'clock in the morning, I think.
I can't even... It sounds like Kasper was one of the closest players to the family. One of the first signings. I can't imagine what he's going through, because it must feel like he has lost, you know, a really close personal friend as much as anything else, which is, you know, just incredibly difficult to go through.
Well, Kasper tweeted following the crash, "I cannot believe this is happening. I'm so totally devastated and heartbroken. I just cannot believe what I saw last night. It doesn't seem real. You gave hope to everyone that the impossible was possible, and not just to our fans, but to fans all over the world in any sport." And I think in some of the memorials that we saw in the last few days, there was one where a lot of the Leicester players and squads and people who work at the club gathered on the pitch. And you could see, I think Kasper was with one of the members of the family, stood right next to him with his arm around him. I think, as you said, he clearly is such an integral part to that whole Leicester family. Hopefully, you know, he can handle the situation. Hopefully there are people there to support him, having seen that and being suffering through this. I mean, Leicester, their Carabao Cup clash with Southampton was obviously called off on Tuesday. Not surprising at all. But their weekend clash with Cardiff on Saturday will go ahead. I don't think anyone would have particularly blamed them if they decided not to go.
And I think the players had the choice as well. It sounds like there was a unanimous decision to play the game. And I think if any one of them hadn't agreed to that, it would have been postponed, which, as you say, is perfectly understandable. But I think that just shows the unity within the squad, that it's something that they can get through together, supporting each other.
I mean, all Premier League matches this weekend will have a minute's tribute to Vichai, not surprising, and those the other 4 people who died in the helicopter crash. It'll be a surreal match, though, won't it, this weekend?
It certainly will. I've been to a few games where there's been odd atmospheres, but I think this one will be different to anything we've ever seen before. And, you know, just browsing through social media, it seems like the Cardiff City fans are completely as affected by this as any other set of fans, and I'm sure there will be almost a feeling of unity within the stadium. Club rivalries, you know.
You're not going to get people booing the Leicester players on the ball.
Absolutely not. And you see, you know, a lot of this, it's almost pantomime, isn't it? In certain situations, you know, rivalries are very real in football, but it puts things into perspective when events like this happen, because it brings that whole footballing family together.
In addition to memorials at the ground, Leicester have opened a book of condolence online for people who want to leave tributes to Vichai and those who died in the helicopter crash. What we'll do is we'll put a link in the YouTube description to that if you wanted to go over and leave comments yourself. The shadow over the club will probably last for a few more weeks, if not months, maybe even years to come now. Where do you see the club going next?
Vichai's son is vice chairman and has been for a few years now. He's been integral to the kind of footballing operations side of things, and he's been at his dad's side through a lot of the events of the past, certainly 5 years, 6 years, since he took that position up as vice chairman. So, you know, obviously it'll be extremely painful experience for him, but I think the King Power ownership will continue. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a permanent memorial to Vichai, in terms of either, you know, a statue outside the ground commemorating what he's done, a stand, even the entire stadium being named, you know, in his honour. There's also £100 million worth of training complex has been approved outside just outside the city to the north. That kind of work's been, planning permission's been granted and work should begin on relatively soon. Then, you know, that being named after Vichai and everything, to commemorate everything that he's done for the club, would be a fitting tribute. I think it looks absolutely incredible. The images online, the plans that you see emerge when these big projects come about, it's the perfect encapsulation of where Leicester have moved to as a club. And I think there'll be certainly a permanent reminder of everything that Vichai personally and, you know, as a business owner, essentially, has committed to that.
Yeah. And Goal will be in Leicester to cover their next home game, which will be, I believe, against Burnley. Yeah. That will be an overwhelmingly emotional day.
Yeah,
you'll be there, I imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, Cardiff will be odd. I think the first time, and obviously there's going to be a big travelling band of Leicester City fans down to the Cardiff City Stadium, but the first home game will be.
I think it'll hit home for a lot of people.
I think it will be, and obviously there's been a lot of fans around the ground that have been to pay their respects, but you know, fans travel from far and wide to come to the ground for match days, and it will be hopefully an atmosphere of remembrance, but also of celebration of everything that we achieved. You know, the pre-match video that is played on the big screens at the King Power, is a lot of it is kind of clips of the past, going quite far back, you know, to the black and white days, but a lot of it is the recent successes of the Premier League and the Champions League season and the promotion from the Championship. It's a stark reminder of where we've been as a journey, and I think, you know, there will never be a more poignant round of applause almost as when the image of Ranieri and Schmeichel lifting that trophy and Wes Morgan, and that's kind of interjected into that every match day. Yeah, I think it'll be unbelievable in terms of an atmosphere, because the fans will want to show unity, and you know, it will bring everyone together in a way that probably we've never seen before.
And I think we've seen a lot of that this week, haven't we? In the way that people leave, the thousands, tens of thousands of people travelling to the stadium to leave that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the footage from, you know, what's essentially become a vigil over the last 4 or 5 days, it's just been unbelievable.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Jim. Appreciate you chatting about it, and hopefully Leicester can bounce back from what is an awful tragedy. You can hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get all the latest Leicester developments direct from Goal.